Why your future depends on boring decisions. Most people assume their future will be shaped by big moments. A major promotion, a perfect investment, a bold career move, something dramatic that clearly changes everything. But for most people, that moment never comes. Instead, life moves quietly. You go to work, you pay your bills, you make reasonable choices. Nothing collapses, but nothing truly breaks through either. Years pass, and one day you realize your life looks almost exactly like it did 5 years ago, just more expensive. That's when the real question shows up. If nothing is wrong, why doesn't it feel like things are getting better? The uncomfortable answer is this: your future isn't shaped by exciting decisions. It's shaped by boring ones, the ones that don't feel powerful, motivating, or even meaningful in the moment. And today, we're talking about why those boring decisions matter more than almost anything else when it comes to money, career, and long-term freedom. This topic matters because most people don't feel like they're making bad financial decisions. In fact, they feel like they're doing things right. They work consistently, pay their bills, avoid obvious mistakes, and try to be responsible with money. From the outside, their lives look stable, but stability is not the same as progress. Across the US and the UK, a growing number of working adults are experiencing the same quiet frustration. Income rises slowly, if at all. Expenses rise just as fast. Savings exist, but don't feel meaningful. Investments are started, but don't seem to change anything. Career paths feel predictable, yet strangely limiting. Nothing is collapsing, but nothing is clearly improving either. This is where the confusion begins. If you're doing the sensible things, why doesn't it feel like your future is getting stronger? The answer isn't hidden in complex strategies or secret opportunities. It's in the nature of the decisions being made. The choices that actually shape long-term outcomes are often repetitive, unglamorous, and emotionally unrewarding. Saving when it feels pointless. Investing when returns are small. Developing skills before they lead to higher pay. Saying no to lifestyle upgrades that feel deserved. These decisions don't feel powerful. They don't create excitement or instant feedback. In fact, they often feel like you're doing a lot for very little visible return. As a result, many people deprioritize them without realizing it. They delay, soften, or abandon these actions because they don't feel productive. Instead, energy shifts toward decisions that feel active but don't compound. Tweaking plans, waiting for better conditions, keeping options open, staying flexible. All of this feels intelligent and cautious. But it often leads to one outcome: long periods of motion without momentum. The core problem isn't that people make reckless choices. It's that they underestimate how much their future depends on boring, consistent decisions, especially when those decisions don't feel meaningful in the moment. The reason boring decisions are so easy to ignore isn't a lack of discipline or intelligence. It's the way human psychology and modern systems work together to push attention toward what feels urgent, visible, and emotionally rewarding. Over time, this creates a bias that quietly works against long-term financial progress. One major root cause is how feedback works. Boring decisions offer delayed rewards. When you save a small amount, invest consistently, or build a skill after work, nothing dramatic happens. There's no instant payoff, no clear signal that you're winning. Meanwhile, spending, upgrading your lifestyle, or changing plans creates immediate emotional feedback. You feel progress, even if nothing meaningful actually changes. The brain naturally favors what feels rewarding now over what pays off later. Another cause is how success is portrayed. Most financial stories highlight outcomes, not processes. You see people after the breakthrough, not during the years of repetition that came before it. This distorts expectations. Slow, steady actions start to feel inadequate because they don't resemble the visible results you're exposed to. As a result, boring consistency is mistaken for stagnation. There's also a structural issue. Modern work and money systems reward short-term performance more than long-term positioning. Promotions, bonuses, and recognition often come from visible effort, not from quietly building resilience. This trains people to optimize for what gets noticed, not for what compounds. Over time, People become excellent at staying busy while neglecting the unglamorous actions that actually build leverage. Finally, boredom itself is misunderstood. Boredom is often interpreted as a sign something isn't working. In reality, boredom is frequently a sign that a system is stable and repeatable. Compounding requires repetition, and repetition rarely feels exciting. When people constantly seek stimulation, novelty, or reassurance, they break the very patterns that would have paid off if left alone. These forces don't push people toward bad decisions. They push people away from boring ones. And that subtle shift is what quietly shapes outcomes over decades, not months. Once you understand that boring decisions are where real progress hides, the question becomes practical. How do you actually work with them instead of constantly fighting them? The answer isn't motivation, inspiration, or a dramatic mindset shift. It's structure. The first change is redefining what progress looks like. Progress is not excitement, it's repeatability. If an action is easy to stick with on ordinary, uninspired days, it's far more valuable than an action that feels powerful once and then disappears. Saving automatically, investing on a fixed schedule, and consistently developing one or two career-relevant skills may feel dull. But they create forward motion even when you're tired, busy, or distracted. Another key shift is moving from decision-making to decision removal. The fewer choices you have to make, the easier consistency becomes. Automating savings, simplifying investment strategies, and committing to a clear career direction reduce mental friction. You stop renegotiating with yourself every month. Boring systems work precisely because they don't require constant willpower. This also means accepting that early results will feel underwhelming. In the beginning, numbers are small, raises don't change much, investments barely move. Skill development doesn't immediately lead to recognition. That phase is not a sign of failure, it's the entry cost. The goal at this stage isn't to feel successful, but to stay in the process long enough for results to accumulate. From a career perspective, this looks like choosing depth over constant change. Instead of chasing every opportunity, you deliberately build competence where leverage can grow over time. Skills that improve judgment, communication, and problem-solving compound quietly and raise your long-term ceiling, even if they don't pay instantly. The practical direction is simple, but not flashy. Build systems that run when motivation doesn't. Trust repetition over intensity. Let boring decisions do the work you don't feel happening yet. The real impact of boring decisions doesn't show up quickly, and that's exactly why they're so easy to abandon. In the short term, they feel ineffective. In the long term, they quietly separate outcomes in ways that are hard to reverse. When boring decisions are applied consistently over years, something subtle but powerful happens. Financial systems stabilize, savings stop feeling fragile, investments begin to move in noticeable ways. Career experience turns into leverage instead of just time served. The same actions that once felt pointless start producing disproportionate results, not because they suddenly change, but because time finally amplified them. This is where many people misunderstand financial freedom. They imagine it as a dramatic moment, a big promotion, a breakout investment, or a sudden leap in income. In reality, it's usually the result of long periods where nothing impressive seemed to be happening. Financial freedom often feels anticlimactic when it arrives, because the work that created it was quiet and repetitive. If boring decisions are ignored, the consequences are rarely immediate. Life continues, bills get paid, nothing breaks. But over time, the lack of compounding becomes visible. Progress feels fragile. Every setback feels bigger than it should. Income increases don't create relief, because there's no underlying system supporting them. At that point, people often try to fix years of neglect with urgency and risk, exactly when mistakes are most expensive. Time magnifies both paths. Consistency makes outcomes smoother and more predictable. Inconsistency creates pressure and volatility. The difference isn't talent, intelligence, or luck. It's how long someone was willing to repeat actions that didn't feel rewarding at the time. Over the long run, boring decisions don't just build money. They build optionality, the ability to slow down, say no, change direction, or absorb uncertainty without panic. That's the part people rarely talk about. Financial freedom isn't about excitement. It's about calm. And calm is almost always built through years of unremarkable, disciplined choices that most people quit too early. When you step back and connect everything, one truth becomes clear. Your future is shaped far less by big, dramatic moments than by the quiet decisions you repeat when no one is watching. The boring choices, the ones that don't feel urgent, impressive, or emotionally rewarding, those are the decisions that quietly decide where you end up. Most people don't fail financially because they make terrible choices. They fall behind because they underestimate the power of consistency. They expect progress to feel exciting. They expect proof early, and when that proof doesn't show up, they assume something is wrong. So they change direction, pause, or wait for a better moment. Each time that happens, the clock resets. Boring decisions don't ask for belief. They ask for patience, saving a fixed amount each month, investing even when returns look small, showing up to build skills before they're demanded. These actions don't feel like freedom in the moment. They feel restrictive. Sometimes they even feel pointless. But over time, they create momentum that's hard to stop. This is where the gap between people widens. Not because some are smarter or luckier, but because some stayed consistent through the phase where nothing seemed to happen. They trusted repetition when motivation faded. They allowed time to do its work. And eventually, the results became visible, not all at once, but clearly enough to change how they experienced money, work, and stress. If you ignore boring decisions, the future often feels heavier, more pressure, fewer options. Every decision feels urgent because there's no buffer underneath it. But when you commit to them, something shifts. Progress becomes quieter, but steadier. Anxiety decreases. Choices become easier, not because life becomes simple, but because your foundation becomes stronger. Your future doesn't depend on finding the perfect strategy. It depends on whether you're willing to keep making the same unexciting decisions long enough for them to matter. So here's the question to reflect on. Which boring decision have you been avoiding because it doesn't feel impactful yet? And what might change if you committed to it for the next few years? Even without immediate proof? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which part of your financial or career journey feels the most boring and hardest to stay consistent with right now?